last show, Goodbye, Farrell, Amen, was a huge hit in the whole world.
Yes.
And what I realized after a couple of seasons or a couple of years watching that those emotions, all the tears and hugs, were not only what we saw on the TV, and there was something more behind all of that.
Right. Yeah, we it resulted from a conversation Alan and I had when we were doing a particular show at near the end of the 10th season of the show, my 7th. I said, how long do you anticipate doing this? And he said, I always felt maybe 10 years and it should be over. And I said, well, and we talked about it for quite a while, but I said, wouldn't it be great if we could have an end of the show episode where the war's over? I mean, I don't want to say I came up with all these ideas. We and ultimately in the group came up with it. But what we said was, television series are canceled periodically for all kinds of reasons. And what we don't want is to just go on until some network executive says, oh, ho hum, I've had enough of this, and turns it off. And we don't want, after doing 10 years of episodes, 7 for me, the writers were scratching their heads, beating their heads against walls, trying to figure out, how do we keep doing this? And what new something can we come up with? Another turn, another twist in the circumstance to keep the show alive. And none of us wanted it to become what happens sometimes with shows that go on for a very long time, is that they become stale. They become sort of copies of themselves. And we said, we don't want that to happen. So we sat down with the rest of the company, the other actors, and we had a long talk about it. And there was some disagreement, Harry particularly, and he said, you'll never have another experience like this. Why end it now? But we all finally came to an agreement and said, we want to tell the studio and the network that we not only do we not want to do the show anymore, but we want an end to the war episode where we get to say goodbye to each other as characters, and we get to say goodbye and thank you to the audience. And Alan came up with that genius idea about goodbye and rocks, as he pulled away in the helicopter. And when we told the studio, I'm sure they had heart failure. They wanted the show to keep going because it was making them lots and lots and lots of money. And one executive came down to the set and he said, look, we can agree to the end of the show if that's what you guys want, but there can be no end of the war episode. And we said, why not? And he said, do you remember The Fugitive? David Jansen was an actor in American television. I don't know if it ever got to your country, but it was a show called The Fugitive, and it was about a doctor whose wife had been murdered, and the police thought he was the murderer, and he was the only one who saw or knew that this one-armed man evil character had actually killed his wife. So instead of giving up to the police, he went on, became a social outcast, going around trying to find the man who had actually killed his wife. And he was a fugitive from justice, the doctor was, because he was trying to find the man who he was the only one who knew had actually done the crime. Well, we said, yeah, sure, we know The Fugitive. He said, well, at the end of the series, when David Jansen decided he wanted to not do it anymore, he decided he wanted to have an end of the series episode where he found the one-armed man, he proved his innocence, and it was over. And we said, yeah. And he said, well, it killed the show in syndication. Syndication is the reruns after the show goes off the air. They rerun and rerun and rerun, and people make a lot of money. Sorry, I'm gonna.
Yeah, sure.
I just hung it up. The studios and the network make a lot of money selling the show in syndication, and they said it killed having the end of his journey known to them. People didn't watch the episodes anymore. And he said, so you can't have the end of the war episode, because in David Jansen's case, the Fugitives case, it killed the show in syndication. And we looked at each other and looked at him, and I said, it may surprise you to know this, but most people know the Korean War ended. I mean, it was the most idiotic notion that could possibly be given. And he sort of looked at us, and everybody smiled at him, and he got up and walked out of the room. And they came back and they said, no, you can't do a half-hour episode that ends the war. But if you'll come back for an abbreviated 11th season, 12 episodes, we will let you make a 2-hour movie that does what you want it to. And as you know, it turned out to be a 2.5-hour movie. And the reason they let us do it is because they held it back. They wouldn't show that for a long time because they were afraid the audience would stop watching MASH once they knew that the war ended and we got home. Anyway, it always makes me laugh to think of this poor fool who thought that was going to be the end of the show for them. And as you say, when it did air, the audience was, it skyrocketed. I mean, our ratings have been very good and sometimes sensational, but suddenly they were earth-shattering. No television show has ever duplicated that. I guess the football games, the
Super Bowl.
Super Bowl gets more of an audience, but who cares?